All right, cool. Now that we understand blockchain, we have a better idea of what that is. I'm going to dive in to a little more of the nuances. I spoke about, relationships to spreadsheets, databases, cells, columns, rows, data, mapping, all that jazz. But what is it, right? Really? What's inside of those cells, for example, those rows, are these things called smart contracts. They're instruction manuals. When you think about it, at the very core, they're diagrams, they're instructions, there's rules, there's regulations. There could even be legalities tied into a smart contract, right? The simplest way to think about these things are flow diagrams or API calls. A really simple example that you'll find all over the internet is the example of the vending machine contract, but also, traffic light systems, they're also running on smart contracts, right? The traffic light is an autonomous system that has programs and computers built into it. When a car approaches it, it hits a pad. That pad recognizes the weight of the vehicle. The weight of the vehicle triggers a mechanism. That mechanism runs through a series of instructions and flows. If all the criteria is met, the traffic lights do their thing. They change, they don't change, it's, whatever. There are systems, there are control rooms where people do control these things manually through CCTV, recording and stuff like that, but they're mostly autonomous systems that are ran by little computers and sensors. That's a big example, but when you narrow it back down and you think about smart contracts and how they relate to what you're seeing in the news, artwork, real estate, finance, that's where these things came from. We'll dive more into that later. But just recognize that a smart contract is really the data inside the blockchain cell. You know what I'm saying? That smart contract has information inside of it, and what that does is it tells things how to behave, how to operate, how to go about doing whatever it is that they need to do. Inherently, they are not legal contracts, but legal contracts can be built into it. You can write things like royalties, licensing, payments, permissions, access, usage, etc. Lawyers, you get all fancy with your legalese. You link up with some sort of smart contract developer, Solidity developer, blockchain developer. You formulate a template, and then boom, you have a structured smart contract. The thing with smart contracts, though, and you really need to understand, is they have to be perfected up front. What I mean by that is once it hits that blockchain, there's no control Z. You can append information to a contract, basically by adding to it, but they're immutable. So when you hit that button to deploy, if you have a mistake in your contract that can be exploited, similar to a lot of hacks that you've seen, there's not a lot of like, oh shoot, I can just erase that mistake. You got to go in, you got to fix it, you got to deploy new contracts, etc. It's important with smart contracts to know that the upfront work and testing has to be done. There's test networks, there's ways around it, so don't get freaked out. But the purpose and the idea is to structure these sets of rules, these guidelines, these regulations, however you want to label it, so you can remove the need for people involved in repetitive tasks. That's where autonomous comes from. That's where decentralization is coming from. That's where a lot of these pushes are coming from. It's taking out the middleman, per se. And the middleman doesn't necessarily mean it's a middle man or woman. It just means it's removing the central entity in between the creator and the consumer.